June 7, 1881. Sunday Herald, Baltimore, Maryland. The Jensen Interview. More of what the noted resurrectionist told the Herald man. Continued from yesterday. Reporter: did you always take adult bodies, or would you get children as well? Jensen: except I had a special order, I did not meddle with children. They don't pay. I recollect once at Georgetown College that they wanted a child's body, and as I had to go to the cemetery that night for a couple of female subjects, I gathered in 7 youngsters, and setting them up in the dissecting room, called in the students and told them to take their pick at $1 apiece. While I was engaged talking, one of the students stole a baby that I brought along just for fun. I made up my mind after that never to get children except on special order. There is no money in them. Reporter: did you take to the Georgetown College all the subjects you obtained? Jensen: no, indeed. I collected more than they could use, so I sold some to the Howard University, the National College, and shipped a number to different parts of the country. At first, I used to pack stiffs in boxes, but afterwards, I used nothing but barrels. I remember that on one occasion, I had the bodies of a tall, thin Methodist parson and a fat woman in one barrel. It was a tight squeeze to get them both in, and I had to piece them head to feet, sticking their heads between each other's legs, and even then, it was necessary to jump on the lid of the barrel before we could fasten it. I was a little anxious about that package, so when the express called, I rode on the wagon too, and just as we backed up to the office, the jar started the top of the barrel, and up popped the head of the parson. The driver and I looked at one another for about 15 seconds, and then I rushed at the barrel, pushed down the stiff, clapped the lid on, and sat on it. The driver brought some large nails and a hammer, and we coopered it up. Reporter: did you ever receive the body of a person that had died an unnatural death? Jensen: I once got the bodies of 2 men that had been hanged, and I have been approached on the subject of getting rid of inconvenient stiffs. I remember one fellow who tried several times to get me to assist him in enticing 2 girls he knew on board a boat, and then outrage and kill them. I have frequently had persons offer to furnish me with fresh subjects if I would pay for them, but I didn't propose to be mixed up in any murder case, and don't you forget it. Reporter: is one body as good as another for that purpose? Jensen: the price I would receive would be about the same, except in special cases, but a thin person is easier to handle and better for dissecting purposes. I preferred to get hold of those who have died from consumption, pneumonia, or some similar disease, and that reminds me of a fat woman I got. She weighed about 200 pounds, and we had a tough time getting her out of the grave, but we rigged a rope around her neck and hauled her up. I had a pile of trouble with that stiff. I took her to Georgetown College, intending to ship her off to a customer in the West, but just as we got her out of the wagon, the bag she was in split, and down fell the naked body on the sidewalk. That caused a scene, for there happened to be some people passing, and the women screamed like devils. We grabbed hold of our subject and dragged it inside the college as quickly as possible, and there I tried to stick her in a barrel, but she was too big. The professor and I worked at her for nearly an hour, but squeeze her down the best we would, we could not get the head of the barrel on. I tried by jumping on the lid to press it down so that the professor could nail it, but it was no go. The barrel wouldn't hold a 200-pounder, and I, therefore, sold her to the college, and a lovely time we had getting her up to the dissecting room. There was a spiral staircase leading from the lower floor, and any ordinary stiff we could easily carry up, but she was too heavy, so we had to put a rope around her neck and get some of the students to help us. Reporter: how do you manage when there are plants on the grave not to leave any evidence of your guilt behind? Jensen: oh, that is easy enough. I first examine carefully the spot, and then, as each flower is removed, it is placed in precisely the same position on a piece of canvas, or on or nearby and when we have filled the grave up again, the plants are put back just as we took them. Reporter: I suppose there were other resurrectionists in Washington besides yourself? Did you never find when you went after a subject that someone had been there ahead of you? Jensen: Well, of course there were others, but after Dr. Christensen was driven away, there was no one that amounted to much. The students of the different colleges will try now and then to get a stiff, but they are only amateurs. I believe they consider that no student has properly gone through the mill unless he has assisted at least one resurrection. I have frequently had them come with me on such expeditions. They helped with the work, and I got the money. I played a good trick once on a lot of fellows from Howard University. The faculty had agreed to notify me when they knew of any burials, and I was to get the subject for them. But they didn't stick to their bargain, and I had been fooled 2 or 3 times, going on a wild goose chase after a stiff, only to find that the grave had already been emptied and I was out both time and money. I felt rather savage towards those fellows and was only waiting for an opportunity to get square. It came sooner than I expected, for starting out one night to make a raid on Potter's Field, I found when we reached an old tree nearby where I used to fasten my horse that someone else had tied their horse and wagon there, and I knew immediately what was up. So ordering my men to quietly drive a short distance away, proceeded on foot to the burial ground to reconnoiter and soon discovered the Howard fellows hard at work. I let them go ahead till they had taken the 2 bodies out and had refilled the graves, when I suddenly gave a whistle and showed myself. They started and ran, and we bagged the game and all their tools, including 2 good rubber bags, which they had abandoned in their flight. Reporter: Did you ever obtain any other bodies in a similar manner? Jensen: Occasionally, but not often. One day, I was standing on the street where I lived when I saw the Board of Health wagon come along. I hailed the driver and asked him if he had anything inside. He said yes, 1 body, but couldn't let me have it. I told him that I didn't care much about a single stiff and invited him to take a drink, telling him that he could drive the wagon down that alley. It runs past the back door of my residence, a few yards, and leave his team there, as it would be all safe. Then I walked him around to the front door of my house, and we went in and took several drinks. A friend of mine happened to have just called, and I gave him a hint to keep the driver engaged in conversation, and, excusing myself for a moment, I left the room and rushed to the back door, picking up a hatchet from the woodshed on my way. I jumped into the wagon, opened the coffin, and had the stiff out of it into the woodshed in less than 5 minutes. Then I returned to the parlor, and having given the driver another drink, pleaded an engagement as an excuse to leave. We walked back to the alley and he drove off, never doubting but what the stiff was all right, for the coffin was still there. I requested my friend to guard the woodshed. There was a body in that woodpile, you bet, as I was afraid that our servant might go there for fuel and spoil the whole business, and I hurried off to get my carryall, relieved my friend, and took the stiff to the college. To be continued.